Greetings, greenhouse people, and welcome to another installment of Tech on Demand, where our goal is always to bring you tips, tricks, and information to produce, and in this case, sell your best crop ever. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and I'm happy to be joined today by Bryce Anderson, the sales manager for the HC companies. Bryce is a 28-year industry vet with experience in a wide range of roles, from greenhouse production and distribution to retail and even manufacturing. He's been a head grower and production manager, as well as a garden center manager. He also brings experience in sales and operation management and says his skills have evolved over the years to include water, media, nutrition management, and he has a particular focus on crop quality. And it is this comprehensive understanding of the industry that makes him perfect for our discussion today. Are growers selling themselves short? The struggle to balance price with value. It's going to be a dynamic conversation, I'm sure of it, and I really can't wait to get started. So, Bryce, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Bill, good morning. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
For sure. So why don't we get started real quick with a little bit of an icebreaker for the listeners. So when you think about this topic that we're going to discuss today, balancing price with value, what have you seen over the years that inspired you to want to have this discussion?
One thing that really stands out in my mind is the $7.99 or the $9.99 hanging basket being sold at retail, because I'd rather sell them fast and sell out, knowing that they're going to sell anyway. So it's like, hey, Bill, I've done it, I've grown it, I've wholesaled it, shipped it, trucked it, watered it, fertilized it, sprayed it. I know what it takes, and it just makes me cringe.
For sure. I have actually my own experience with that. The garden center I used to work at, we raised hanging basket prices, and they were probably $7.99, and we raised them $2, which was like a huge deal. And I remember our manager like, we're just going to go ahead and give it a shot. We sold just as many. Nobody even blinked. And I guarantee that the next year we raised prices on gallon perennials, raised prices on packs of flats. And again, there was no resistance, and all that fear kind of went away. So it's funny you mentioned hanging baskets, because that is definitely one that I've seen in action.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. With all, goods, I feel like there's a ceiling, like a tolerance of what consumers are willing to pay, but why play at the bottom? Let's try to find that ceiling, because there's a lot of work that goes into what we do in this industry, and it's a dollar that basically stays out of our pockets for every dollar we fearfully don't add to the value of our crops.
Yep, and you can tell pretty quick when you walk into a retailer or grower if they come from kind of a cut flower background, where they tend to have higher prices, or from a produce background where it's all about volume. And I've had people mention that to me before when we've walked in and say, oh yeah, I can tell that this, these guys had a truck farm back in the day, because, they're all about just cranking out volume at a pretty low price. And then on the opposite end of the cut flower guys, where they're, really focused on that high quality, high dollar. So
yeah, it's interesting. I think that, there's a fair amount of greenhouse flower growers that, whether they were cut flowers before, they were truck farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Their first greenhouses went up, as a means to start their vegetable seeds for the field.
Yep.
And then, along the way, a daughter, a son, a wife, or the owner or whoever, they wanted to start a few flowers for the garden. It stemmed from there. So It was almost like kind of like a little bonus crop for the primary family business. So it's like, well, let's just get it growing and get it out. It's a little bit extra.
Exactly. Or folks were knocking on their doors saying, hey, will you grow us some flowers back in the day? And all of a sudden now, next thing you know, they're third generation greenhouse.
Yeah.
So I think that actually sets a stage really well for this discussion. So when we talk about this, what we both seen and what folks have seen as a hesitation or even aversion to raising prices, is what inspires that fear? Is it just the fear that they're going to have a full greenhouse at the end of the season when it ought to be empty? Or is there more to it? What do you think?
I think selling out is critical, because It's interesting how just in the years that I've been doing this, it seems like our industry has evolved, at least in my mind. And what I'm offering are my insights, thoughts, opinions based on observations, personal experience, the experiences that I've shared with others. But I think that our industry has evolved to a more business oriented industry with generational transitions. And when I think back over the 28 years I've been doing this, it was literally like, you got a piece of paper, you draw a line down the middle of it, and on the left-hand side, you write your expenses, and on the right-hand side, you write your revenues, and you hope that the right column is more than the left column. Everybody's in business to make money. And I think back in the, based on the, from the stories I've been told, back in the heyday of the terrarium plant days back in the 70s and really into the 80s, when flowers were, the garden center was the destination. The one thing that I think happened that kind of shaped where we've gone the last 20 years was really the kind of the growth of the big box store. How many times have we all heard that, or experienced, as growers and as retailers, kind of the fear of got to compete with the big box store, don't want to lose market share to the big box store. And, I feel that that's kind of been that feeling has kind of stuck around for a while, and that kind of shaped the pricing models and has really played a role in kind of the diminished values in the crops that we produce.
Makes a lot of sense. And you're right. I think that we are seeing a change these days, a lot more attention placed on whether it's cost accounting or, maximizing what you're getting out of your square footage. I think that there's a lot more attention to the numbers, and you're not just sweeping all the cash into a shoebox and hoping there's some left after you pay your employees. And no, I think that's really good insight. And definitely seen and heard tons of examples that make me feel like your analysis is pretty spot on. So think about it from maybe we can think about it a little bit from the shopper's perspective, because I know that the leadership of greenhouses is changing, and we've seen a lot of transition in ownership, but I think that we're seeing certainly currently a transition in the type of shopper and who's coming in to buy plants and some of the reasons behind why they're making those purchase decisions. And I know that you do have a pretty good understanding of the market and retail experience. Do you think, is there a lot of price sensitivity on the side of the shopper? Are they shopping one channel, whether it's big box or independent or farm markets or sort of other plant, places where they can buy plants? Take us a little bit into the mind and behavior of today's lawn and garden customer, if you've got your crystal ball handy.
Kind of as I see it, and my feelings on it are is if I'm pricing my products, there's the first and foremost, it's like, what do I need to do as a business owner to make sure that I'm taking care of my business and my needs to be financially successful and be profitable, but also being cognizant of what's going on around me as well. In terms of what are the big box stores, what are the other garden centers, what's the demographic of where I'm located at? Because I think demographics certainly play a part in the kind of those price ceilings and the price tolerances. But I don't, in terms of shoppers, when I was in the greenhouse, we had like what we'd call satellite greenhouses, or we had retail extension, and we had several of them. And the one that did the best out of all of them was right across the street from a Walmart. And logic during those times would have told us, based on kind of the overwhelming thinking was, and the need to compete with Walmart, was that it got to be cheap to compete with Walmart. But the other side of it was a high traffic area. Mm-hmm. So when we think about non-horticulture type goods and services, down here we've got Publix, we've got Ingles, and I'm in Georgia, Bill. I'm down in Athens, Georgia. I've spent the majority of my career up in the upper Midwest, been in Georgia now for a few years. We've got Kroger, Publix, Ingles. I don't think that the shoppers at those stores price shop between the three. They go to the one that's convenient, the one that they're comfortable with. There may be price differences in the products that those grocers offer, but I think it goes unnoticed by the shopper because they're shopping at one or the other. I think the same can be said for Lowe's and Home Depot, and Menards up in the upper Midwest. It's a shopper preference.
Sure.
So, I'm not going to go and buy 2x4x8s at Home Depot and then go buy my 2x6s at Lowe's because there's a dime difference. So I think that you've got maybe a little bit of brand loyalty within the shoppers. Certainly, I think in our industry, we've got, perhaps the customer that frequents the big box home improvement store that will purchase some things there, but is also very committed to the local garden center because they value the quality, the selection, and the customer service and the expertise that comes along with that. So rather than kind of hone in on the pricing differences, kind of hone in on what the value of what my operation is as a flower grower to be able to justify what I do there.
Yeah, and I think the big thing you said there was the loyalty, and in order to generate that kind of loyalty as an independent business, it's really comes down to service, right? I mean, it's service and quality are the two, I think, main factors, and you're right. I think that when you go out to shop for whatever product, you're looking for convenience and getting value for the dollars that you spend. You mentioned local demographics. That is something that there's an intricacy to that, is really understanding your shopper. Sometimes that comes down to, being in the store, asking them questions. If you're a wholesaler selling to garden centers, visit those stores, take a look at who's buying, and really, ask those kind of questions at the beginning of the season when you go to take those orders, and try to fit those demographics. I mean, it's not easy though. I think that we have a wide range of shoppers. Someone mentioned to me that we have like 4 generations shopping at garden centers, whether that is independent or mass market. I mean, you have multiple generations, probably more so than ever in history, shopping together. So it's got to be tough to meet all those needs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the generational overlap right now. I mean, I feel like we're kind of at a crossroads in our industry, and I think a lot of consumer goods type businesses are. It's not exclusive to us, but when I think about historically, urban metropolitan areas, large cities, like Cleveland, where you're at, in Atlanta, where I'm at, where very progressive, very diverse. There's a lot more overlap of the types of shoppers, and it's really a melting pot of shoppers in the metropolitan areas. But what about the rural areas? But I'm the youngest of 6 kids, Bill, and my parents grew up post Great Depression, so they had that Great Depression mindset that you don't, they're misers. It's they want to save. You don't throw away leftovers. You don't spend $2 for something if you can get it for $1.50 somewhere else. My mom would always ask me, how much was gas, how much was milk, and how much was bread. And I'm like, well, I have no idea because I need those 3 things. I just buy them. Yeah. But she was very dialed in on that. And I know that a lot of growers that I work with, and I was in somewhat of a rural area as well, really had to be cognizant of the shoppers, and that generational, because, they were going to be a little bit more dialed in on value. And then where I worked, we had a phenomenal selection. So we'd get the large gardeners coming in wanting to buy the specific varieties and such, but they were also very price conscious. But then we were also able to offer more of a diverse selection of products that were maybe priced where they needed to be, because that kind of catered to the customers that wanted to buy the specific stuff. So it's really understanding your market. Who are you selling to? Another anomaly is like, we couldn't sell cocoa hanging basket, but the Moss one sold. And I have customers that I work with today that they can't sell a 12-inch combo, but they can sell a 10-inch combo, a multicultural basket, or they can't sell Moss, they can sell cocoa. So it's really understanding, the area that I feel that we sell in, being aware of what other players are in the market, but really doing what's right for me and my business when I make pricing decisions.
Yeah, and you need to be aware of what the other stores are doing, but it can't dictate your actions. It's interesting because you're right. In an area like I live, there's so many different options to buy plants. And there are people who shop all of them. There are people who shop only one channel, but you can't base your decisions off of someone else's business model because it's going to be different than your own.
The discussions that are really difficult for me is when I hear that I have to compete with Home Depot or I have to compete with Lowe's in town. And when it's difficult is when the person I'm talking to is selling a 4.5-inch geranium for $1.99 or $2.49 retail, when I know full and well that Lowe's and Home Depot are at the $3.49 and up range.
Sure.
I think when we look back, you've been doing this a couple years yourself. I mean, if we think back over the progression of the big box presence in our industry, I think it's reasonable to say that they did start off by selling cheap, but over time, the pricing has escalated to a point now where they're higher than some of the retailers, the independents, that I work with.
Absolutely, it's not uncommon to see a $4.99, $5.99 quart at all, and those are healthy prices, and the growers getting paid, and the growers making money, and the shoppers are getting a great product that performs well because it's of a decent size. And I think you're absolutely right. The evolution has certainly what's happening today is not what was happening 15, 20 years ago at the hardware stores. That is for sure. So I think, this fear or hesitation to raise prices or to command a higher price is probably a little bit unwarranted. And you've given a lot of really good examples, and it's refreshing to think about, but there are growers that are going to still have hesitation. We know this. And we're still going to see a $7.99 hanging basket. I guarantee we're going to see them this spring. So kind of getting down to the nuts and bolts, how can, if a grower or a listener is reluctant to raise prices, what's your advice to rise above that concern and really increase their revenue? Because it's to me, it's a mindset shift, but I'm interested in what you think, what are those one or two elements that need to shift in a grower's mind before they can take the plunge and add a couple dollars to that item at wholesale?
I think first and foremost is really kind of dig in, emotionally on what those personal barriers are that are making one reluctant to kind of push the price up a little bit. Maybe there's some anomalies in that market that really kind of put that ceiling where it's at. But the folks that tell me that they're competing with the big box store locally, try to understand where those big box price levels are if the two aren't aligned, making sure that, being well informed of who the competition is. But then also really kind of dig into who is my shopper. Do my shoppers bounce around, or do I have repeat shoppers? What if I don't know if I have repeat shoppers? Or the things that I can do, like how about just a simple email list, or like us on Facebook, some simple things that we can do. The really cool thing about that is that a lot of greenhouses and garden centers are going through some generational transitions right now where there's a lot of youth coming in that are starting to do some of these things. But then, the other part of it too is like, in my mind is really evaluating, what my costs are, making sure what my input costs are and kind of trying to get a feel for how my input costs have changed over time in the last year, the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I think that sadly, I think it's generally accepted and by most greenhouse growers that pricing has not kept up with costs. And would you tend to agree with that? I know I've talked to Chris Absolutely. A lot about this, and Chris writes about it all the time. And how do we push the envelope? And then what are the times that we're in right now? Spring creates a frenzy in itself. Kind of that first weekend, whether you're in Cleveland and it's the first weekend in May, or down here it's the last weekend in March, first weekend in April. People get excited. We've been really rainy and cold. You guys are coming out of the polar vortex.
Yep.
How do we capitalize on the frenzy of everything that's going on? And would we sell it if we were $1 more when we're going to sell it anyway? Only an individual business owner can answer those questions, but maybe challenge ourselves to think about, the environment that my business is like in the spring season. And then I think COVID is really, I'm sure a lot of folks are, are over COVID. It's like, but it's a reality. It's impacted all businesses, and I mean, it has created such an incredible, unprecedented, never thought I'd see frenzy around horticulture anyway. Why not capitalize on that? I mean, how many garden centers are like sold out immediately, wish they had more? We saw wholesale growers adding greenhouse space. And those who didn't add space, I think there's a lot of growers that really thought hard about, making some price adjustments because of the limited space. If you can only grow 10, you can only sell 10. And, why not optimize the profits on the 10 that you can grow? So, think about the environment. And what about pricing? I mean, do we raise it all 1%? Do we, probably not.
No, probably pick and choose. I mean, I think you pick and choose.
I like to go back to grocery store produce type models. I think that for decades, our industry has had let's call it a $20 hanging basket, a $5 4.5-inch pot, a $2.49 4-pack, a $9.99 gallon perennial, a $5.99 quart perennial. And that's just whether you buy the $1.50 patented rooted liner version or the seed version. But why not do more of an a la carte type pricing model? We don't need to raise it all. If you grow 100,000 hanging baskets, or if you grow 10,000 hanging baskets, or let's say you grow 500 hanging baskets, and maybe that's your loss leader and you leave that price the same, but why not think about pushing the envelope on, some specific categories like 4.25 or 4.5-inch pots, or splitting up your annuals into more specialty annuals. Lots of different options. I think subtle changes, here and there among sizes and across varieties. I think, that maybe goes a little bit more unnoticed than raising the price on everything all at once.
For sure.
But when I go to the grocery store, Bill, and I buy potatoes, there's 10 different kinds of potatoes in different size bags, and they're all different prices. Why can't we do that in our industry? Why can't proven winners or the ball varieties and the ball genetics be priced a little bit more than the seed varieties that we're doing in a pot?
Yeah. No, I think that there's a lot of logic to that. You just went through a lot. I think that the examining those emotional barriers is probably a good first step. Like why am I afraid to raise prices, or why have I had them set this way for so long? The knowing your costs is hugely critical. And I think we're actually moving pretty well in that direction. I think that that most operations I talk to these days are at least conscious that they need to be much more aware of their costs, and not undervalue or undermeasure their input costs, because you're right, they have gone up over time. Being informed of your surroundings and you're right. What you said is completely accurate. If you ask most retail managers what are the prices at the other stores around you, whether they're big box or other independents, they frequently don't know, or they know what they were 10 years ago, and that's just what they've been operating on. And then the deep understanding of market dynamics, and a lot of that comes to asking questions. You've got a lot of access to customers. I mean, when they're in your store, there's no reason why you can't survey them. You write social media, email lists. Ask your shoppers some questions. Get a better sense of other places they shop, some of their buying habits, and that's going to really help mold a new pricing model. And I would agree. I don't think you drop 1% or 2% across the board. I think you've got to pick and choose. But that does come down to understanding who's shopping at your store, and the price resistance, I think, is much lower than people feel it would be. You're right. What we're going through right now, we've unprecedented numbers of new shoppers, foot traffic, average ticket sale. I mean, everything is becoming, now that we've had a season and looked back on it and seen some of the data, it's very encouraging, and it's not going to slow down this year. I think a lot of growers are being aggressive. A lot of retailers are excited to continue some of that momentum. We've got a massive, massive generation of people reaching their spending years. This is the time to take a hard look at pricing and not continue to leave money on the table moving forward, because I mean, there's so much opportunity.
Oftentimes I hear, well, it's like, geez, it's March, Bryce, it's March, Bill, my prices are set. And it's like, well, why are they set?
Yeah.
If you've got a set number of units and you blow through them, why not a mid-season price adjustment? I think the biggest fear for me as a grower was shrink. Shrink is expensive.
Yeah, that's for
sure.
And
if I had to carry inventory, the longer I carried it, the more expensive it was.
Yep.
So I think you were spot on when fear of not selling out. Yeah, that's huge. It's a huge fear because it's very expensive. Because nowadays it's like there is no more incineration. There are very few, like, what I'll call like personal or private landfills. It's like, right, if it goes in a dumpster, and then the dumpster costs you money, and now you got stuff going to the landfill. So that's a consideration. I remember one of my mentors, when I got into distribution, I was in sales, working for a distributor in the upper Midwest, and one of the things that they told me early on that I've always remembered is, Steve said, Bryce, here's your budget. You can sell as much as you can for as little as you need to get the business, or you can sell as little as possible for as much as you can. It doesn't matter. I don't care, but this is the number you got to hit at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. It's great when you're dealing with hard goods. So,
right.
But with plants, it's not the same. We have to get it right. And we have to try to, it's a lot easier for you and I to talk about it than it is to try to figure it out, because we're dealing with a perishable. Yep. And it is very expensive when we have to throw it away.
Yeah, shrink's a killer throughout the entire chain, from the offshore farm all the way up to that finished hanging basket that goes in the dumpster. I mean, it's definitely one of our biggest issues as an industry that we've gotten better on. I mean, planting to a plan is much more common than it used to be. There's not a whole lot of overage out there, but it also occurs to me that if you're not dumping a little bit, you probably weren't risking enough to gain extra sales. So there's got to be a cost analytic. I mean, so someone smarter than me, I'm sure, has taken a look at how much extra do I need to grow? Because I've also heard it said you make money after the first 2 turns is where you're gonna make your money. So, or the first turn. So how do you maximize that opportunity later in the season? I don't know if that factors into the way you think about pricing or not, but
Yeah, that's a great point, because in understanding, the upper Midwest, we, and in your area, at heat's a huge factor.
sure.
So the earlier crops were the most expensive crops. So it's those second or third turns, and all of a sudden you don't have the heat into it.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as shrink at the retail level, I mean, if you go to the grocery store and you need to buy, I don't know, you take your kids to the grocery store, the pumpkin patch, or wherever you go, and you're going to get pumpkins for Halloween. Or is it going to be a good experience if there's 1,000, or what if there's 2 left?
Right.
So on retail, I know you're in the garden center, Bill. It's like, you try to have at least part of a bench or a decent selection. If I had like 1 or 2, it was better to have none than to have 1 or 2.
That's
so shrink at retail. I don't know. Some listeners may cringe when I say this, but retail shrink seemed a little bit more appropriate in my mind to be around 5 to 6%, because that meant that I was keeping enough on the bench, to have a decent selection for the shopper.
You're right. Nobody wants to shop from an empty bench, or, when there's 2 pumpkins left, you go to the next place. I mean, always you like, even if they're perfect, it's like, I don't know about that. So
yeah. Yep.
I think it's been really a lot of great information. This is a fun conversation. Do you have any thoughts before we close? And I guess if folks want to get in touch with you to either continue the conversation or even to learn more about, we didn't talk much about HC companies, but to learn more about what you guys do, any final thoughts, and how can folks get in touch?
Well, so HC companies, visit our website at hc-companies, plural, .com. And I can be reached at B Anderson at hc-companies.com. Feel free to reach out. As far as closing thoughts, we're a tight industry. We have relationships that are decades long, and we're cultivating and fostering new relationships with the next generations coming up. Tap into our wealth of our massive network. What are others doing? We already talk amongst ourselves, and let's do it together. I applaud. By no means do I want to suggest that everybody's prices are too low, because that's simply not the case. I applaud the growers and retailers that are already doing a lot of things that we've talked about today, and they're the ones that have really kind of helped shape my thoughts on the opportunity to raise prices more for so many others. And take calculated risks, take small risks, and if it doesn't work out, you can always dial it back. It's about an 8 to 12 week season, and it's 8 weeks and it's over, but there's time. Adjust on the fly.
It's true. No, those are great points.
I love this industry. I love growers. I love working with industry professionals in all aspects of the industry, and it is my desire to see everybody do well and prosper and make money and run healthy businesses. So I've given 28 years to this industry, and God willing, I'll give another couple decades before it's all over.
Awesome. I heard a consultant once say to his clients who are growers, he said, I just want y'all to take vacation this year. He's like, and they were all like, we're on vacation. We were touring garden centers. And he's like, no, you're not on vacation. I just want you guys to have enough money that you can take vacation this year. And that seemed like a foreign idea to so many people, and it really, really shouldn't be. So, Bryce, this has been awesome. It's been such a fun discussion. I can honestly say I don't want it to end, but I think lucky for me and for our listeners, you're going to be back. And we're going to dig into some other topics, including sustainable production. So we're going to get down to nuts and bolts of sustainable production. And then we're going to get into product differentiation, which has a lot to do with our discussion today. And it's one thing that I I would have dug into a little bit more if I didn't know that we were going to have a much more thorough discussion about differentiation, because I think a lot of those topics can help with the pricing discussion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the two go hand in hand. So it's
really,
like I almost went down that road today, but I kind of held back a little bit. So we'll save a little bit for next time, Bill.
awesome. This is great. This is great. So Bryce, on behalf of myself, on behalf of Ball Publishing, and all the listeners, thank you so much. Your insights are very inspirational. You've got such a range of knowledge and passion, came across so clearly. So take care.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
I'm Bill Calkins with Ball Tech On Demand, wishing you a fantastic season and some encouragement to take a look at your pricing models and determine where there's room to add more to your bottom line. Be sure to subscribe to Tech On Demand podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and just about all the others. And again, on behalf of Bryce and HC Companies, take care out there.